Welcome to the Liberty Collaborative, where the past meets the present in the fight for freedom. We uncover the roots of liberty, spotlight the people who shaped it, and explore what it takes to preserve it today. If you're ready to think deeper, stand stronger, and act with purpose, you're in the right place. Let's reclaim what matters most.
Hey, welcome everybody to the Liberty Collaborative Podcast. My name is Aaron Bowman, and today we're going to still continue our talk with the branch Brawl, but we're looking at the legislative branch today. And so with me, as always, is Chris Coyle, the inventor of Wind Labs, Mike Hancock, the undercurrent Substack. I can't see, my eyes aren't working today. And K. Carl Smith, the founder of Frederick Douglass Republican Engagement Theory. So welcome, gentlemen, to another show. Glad you are all here. And
be here.
Great
you
to
know,
be here.
Aaron, I'd like to put in a cheap, shameless plug for Michael.
Go for it.
K. Carl. Michael's writing is so good. You guys got to check it out. And K. Carl's editorials, his theories, his real use of Frederick Douglass and the guidance it gives us to K. Carl, just amazing stuff. So these two have been very influential on me, I know, and Aaron on you. So I hope everyone will check them out. And thank you for tolerating my shameless plug for our two co-collaborators here in the Liberty Collaborative. So,
and thank you for the plug, sir.
Yeah.
Most
Aaron,
appreciative.
We always like to recap and frame for people who are new or people who have been watching. Number one, what our mission is at Liberty Collaborative is to provide the content and context that is so often missing from mainstream media. One might ask, is it missing intentionally? Perhaps, but it's certainly missing. The final piece is historical perspective. That's almost always missing. So you hear things like, oh, we're in a constitutional crisis. Well, really? Has this ever happened before in history? Usually it has. And usually there is tremendous guidance and precedent from history. Now, in this podcast, we have covered the branch brawl. We talked about, Michael, at first, the whole positioning of a constitutional crisis. And I think you did a lot to expose the choice of words, the inflammatory sort of nature. Oh my God, Trump, everything's upside down. I think we concluded it isn't. We did the judiciary because so much going on with the courts, as you know, right when we were speaking. In our last podcast, we did the executive branch. Again, a lot of action going on. But what's so interesting about today's podcast is Congress is really meant to be the big cornerstone, anchor, foundation point for a lot of our government. And the question that I think will come up today is, are they doing that? Has their role diminished? What are some of their specific powers that one would hope they would sort of reclaim? So I hope that's helpful, guys, in sort of teeing us up for today.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe for those who might be listening to this episode and haven't listened to the last few that we've done on the branch brawl, maybe we can talk real quick, Chris and Mike and K. Carl, about the natural tension between the branches versus what is considered a constitutional crisis that we constantly hear about in the news. Would anybody like to try to give that a rundown?
Sure. I can talk about that a bit. You know, one of the things that, as you're saying, Aaron, we constantly hear is about, you know, the nation is collapsing. The democracy is being destroyed as a result of the tension, really the natural and design tension between the various different branches. So, you know, we're about to talk about the legislative branch. Well, there's a brawl built into the Constitution that basically says that the legislature can do something, but guess what the president can do? He can veto it, right? And so a lot of what we hear ends up playing in the marketplace in the United States because of the fact that a lot of folks just simply don't understand the Constitution and how our government works. So it's built to last. It's built to have this interplay and go back and forth across time. And as I say, all for the purpose of ultimately creating a more perfect union.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, just plugging in some words here and searching as we're talking. And Madison had said ambition must be made to counteract ambition. So each branch should assert itself, keeping the others in balance. Tension equals constitutional health for the normal way of how our constitution works, Mike, as you're saying. And then I asked, well, give me a definition of constitutional crisis. And it says a crisis means the system itself cannot self-correct through lawful mechanics. And I think that's a real good way of putting it, because when I talk with others on the other side of the aisle or unaffiliated and independents, and they talk about, the constitutional crisis, they really can't explain what it means or even how our system should work. So I just thought maybe that'd be helpful for those who are listening for the first time or watching this video on YouTube. But let's get into today's stuff. Chris, if you want to lead us off on your thoughts. I'm going through the show notes here. So
folks, as we consider the fact that, as we know, generally from civics, right? K. Carl, they hardly teach anymore. We have the maker of laws. There's only one branch that makes federal law. But stand by, that's actually a footnote. We're going to talk about the fourth branch, the agencies, next week or in our next podcast. But the way the Constitution writes, it's really laws come from the congressional branch, the legislative branch. Second, the power of the purse. Everyone sort of heard that. The funding has been given. Now that's sort of been eroded. So what's interesting to note, guys, as we look at Congress today, that is supposed to, right? First of all, let's just go through a little structural description here. There are two, if you will, branches of Congress. They were purposely designed in what was called, believe it or not, the Connecticut Compromise, where there is a House of Representatives based on a percentage of population that turns over much more frequently. I think it's every 2 years. And then you have the Senate, which is a cycle, I believe, every 8 years. And so the idea was, and the compromise was, that every state, regardless of size, would get 2 senators. And then in the House, it would be proportioned on percentage. And the reason this was important was you had little states like Rhode Island saying, wait a second, I'm going to get overwhelmed by South Carolina, Virginia, some of these big states if we count. And K. Carl, we could at some point go back to history of the interesting discussion and debate about some of those clauses in the constitutional debate, in particular the 3/5 clause. But at a high level for a minute, the whole idea was that you've got representation from states that are supposed to debate and have hearings and end up proposing legislation, doing trade-offs. And guys, today, perhaps a good place to start is Congress really doing that anymore? Do they? Now, it appears more recently there are actually some bills that have come out, have been signed. But I think I'd challenge the listeners to the show and all of us. You can't find a lot of really legitimate legislation that has gone through the normal process. It's all this thing called continuing resolution.
Yeah, I think you're right, Chris. And I'm looking at the show notes here, and I think it is one of those things here. What are the powers of Congress? Which ones are most known and consequential? I think that's a great question, because I don't think a lot of people know that, or even would know where to start. Mike or K. Carl, do you want to kind of go over some of the powers, so to speak, that may or may not be well known? I know everybody knows, Congress controls the purse, so to speak, but outside of that, I really don't think a lot of people know what they really do.
What I want to comment on, kind of dovetail what Chris was talking about. A lot of people get confused. They think that our rights come from government. While Congress can write and pass laws, they can't grant us our rights. Their job is to protect our rights. So when you read and study Douglas, he didn't write about the legislative branch in isolation, but he did talk about Congress having the moral authority to protect our God-given rights, not grant them. So That's the misnomer a lot of people are having. So you say Congress can pass laws, they think Congress can grant our rights, and that's not the case.
And sort of adding on to that is that Congress can pass laws, and they can also pass laws that are not constitutional, right?
Correct.
And the key thing there is that's what the branch brawl is all about, right? If Congress passes laws that are unconstitutional, those can be challenged in the courts, and the court ultimately gets to the point where it will rule on its constitutionality or not. And even they can make mistakes or rule on something that's not constitutional.
One thing I kept reading about Douglas, he argued that Congress had power and the obligation to protect liberty and abolish injustice. And sometimes we get a government body to do things that are totally unconstitutional. And that's when the other branches and the citizenry got to put pressure and agitate and put them back in check.
And that requires an educated public, right? That cannot happen. We have responsibilities, and a lot of us have sort of abdicated that. We vote someone into office, and then we go to breakfast until the media informs us of something that makes us aware that something is wrong. And that thing that they make us aware of that's wrong could actually be right, but you don't know that if you don't understand the Constitution.
Yeah, that's really good. That's good points. So I think what people need to understand is, when we're talking about the Constitution, you can go to Article 1, Section 1 and 8 and read about the powers of the legislative. So, all right, that's great. Chris, anything you want to add before
Yeah,
we?
just, if we look through the lens, one way through the lens is from history and the foundation of our federal institutions, but the other way is from people listening through the lens of the media or now their phones. And it might be interesting for us to look at the way people see it. So what they see is a lot of hearings and investigations. They saw impeachments, right? They see once in a while now State of the Union and maybe a few grandstanding, but they really don't see on TV all the machination of committee hearings. And so there are a number of elements there. What is lobbying all about? Is lobbying serve a function where businesses go to Congress and say, look, you're writing a law on this, but maybe just throw it out, guys. We'd start with the hearing power, the investigative power that emanates out of, I think, if they are funding, that is, if Congress is providing funds and the law, then they have the obligation and the sole right really to call hearings, including, I think they can subpoena people. Didn't they just, they're subpoenaing a couple, well, really a lot of people now to dig into matters that appeared closed maybe 6-8 months ago before last November.
Yeah, I think the most recent was Biden's doctor. I think they didn't they subpoena him to have him come in, and he's pleading the fifth left and right, not really answering any questions. And I don't think, from what I saw on the news, that a doctor, yes, there's that client privilege, but when you're subpoenaed, if I understood the commentating correctly, is that subpoena kind of supersedes that closed door where the HIP is involved and stuff like that, because of what went on with the auto pen and other things. Who was running the country? Did Biden really know what he was signing? Like, he released an inmate here in Connecticut who brutally murdered some kids off of death row. Peeler. They released him. Not that we have death row anymore in the state, but he was lifetime in jail. I worked with him in the Supermax, and not with him. I worked around him, and
hopefully not too closely.
But I mean, he's not a good guy,
Yeah.
And how did he get pardoned by Biden? Like,
well, Aaron, to your point, very quickly, throw it to the other guys. What you saw there was Congress saying, we're not asking about his doctor, your analysis of his health. We're asking about your knowledge, a witness to what could be a crime. So apparently they're going to make clear to this doctor and his lawyers, of course, that he will have basically immunity in terms of his personal relationship as a doctor with Biden. What they want to hear is what he saw and observed with regard to Biden in the auto pen. So I think these investigative, it looks like you've got a group that's pretty seasoned now. Remember, Kash Patel and all these people, Nunes, years ago, started looking into things. No one thought it was for real. And they kept getting documents, kept proving. And the difference was they really had proof. And now we see today it's all being exposed. But that particular 25th Amendment and investigation by Congress is in the news right now.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that's real critical to understand, too, is that if I've been subpoenaed, I can certainly refuse to honor or show up. And so then the question becomes one of, well, what power does Congress have at that point to enforce a subpoena? Now, as I was starting to look at this, at first I thought that, well, all they could do is refer something, do a criminal referral to the DOJ. But what I also discovered is that Congress actually does have the power to lock somebody up and trial them. Although that I don't think that's ever that has been used since 1934, I think was the last time. But Congress can have the sergeant of arms actually go and arrest somebody on the spot and then detain them until a trial is held.
Yeah. Maybe that's needed. I'm not sure how many people even know that, Michael and K. Carl, or Aaron, even see it as a viable threat anymore. It's kind of Congress to me. Sorry, guys, Republican and Democrat sort of look like performance art at work.
Yep.
Everyone's in front of a camera, right? They still, both parties spend a ton of money. So it's interesting they didn't take it for real. But a related thing I'm just curious about is this term impeachment. So we know that both sides, whoever's in power, we're going to impeach this. What is impeachment and what's its intended purpose and what really has happened recently with it?
Yeah, I wasn't going to go there, so I'm not. I was going to ask, since we were talking about Congress, if we could put off that question for a second, Chris.
Yeah.
The decline of congressional power. Do you think that is something that is happening? I know it's in our show notes, and I think it. To me, like you said, Chris, a lot of it is in front of cameras, kind of like what I'm sitting in front of right now and the rest of us. And it's on the nightly news. There's always somebody from Congress giving some talking statements in front of the news. But I think that, for me, outside of the one big, beautiful bill that's passed, I can't recall any other major bills that have been passed through Congress lately. But it seems like the ATF is always making some new rule or law, and they're not really lawmakers. So kind of like it's going around and you have these agencies creating laws and not the actual Congress, if that makes sense to anybody. That's kind of how I feel like things have been happening lately.
There lies the problem. And we're going to talk about that next week, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But we have these unaccountable bureaucrats who are controlling our lives. And that's not part of the three branches, but it's a fact of life. We got to deal with it.
Yeah, that's true. So, I guess we'll save that for next week. I'm really, kind of excited to talk about the fourth branch.
Yeah.
Well, to your point, though, Aaron, if you look at legislation and the drafting, the specific text of a law, there appears to be more and more dispute over the extent to which that law enables, let's say, the executive branch, in this case, Trump, to do something. Was it intended they go this far? So there's a great deal of litigation now backed up about tariffs and how far can Congress go in delegating or allowing its authority to tax and so forth to the executive branch. And it really raises interesting constitutional questions and practical questions. Congress can't hardly do a bill. How is it going to negotiate tariffs, let alone threaten them? In the time it takes them to call a meeting, Trump's announcing things like tariff settlements with Japan and Indonesia. So what's going on there?
Well, before we answer that question, we're going to take a quick break if that's okay with you guys. So we'll be back in 30 seconds.
Divorce doesn't have to be a battle. At Divorce with Dignity, Hartford, we help couples separate peacefully with fairness, clarity, and compassion. Choose dignity. Choose mediation.
All right, we are back.
I hear that's a great firm, Aaron.
Yeah, let's get back into it. All right, my little bell there. So go ahead, Chris, with what you were saying.
Yeah, repeat your question.
Well, so the question is, there is increasing, and I should check that, but certainly it's in the news recently that various sides view the delegation of Congress or the scope and power in a particular law. And I use the example of tariffs, where people are suing the International Tariff Court or these various courts that the Trump administration has exceeded its authority in announcing tariffs, implementing tariffs. Partly the argument is, well, that's revenue. But what's interesting is an anachronism here, or could Congress really react as quickly as the executive branch is acting and apparently getting results? So here's maybe a good tension where the executive's going to feel out what it needs to do to get stuff done, while Congress kind of goes, particularly the opposition party, well, you shouldn't be doing that. So it's an interesting conundrum, right? Yeah, supposedly not supposed to be doing it, but he's scoring a lot of points that are helping America and settling things around the world, while Congress can't apparently even get a hearing together.
Well, you're absolutely right. Congress, for the most part, appears to be dysfunctional, largely dysfunctional, right? And I think at least over the last 8 or 10 years or so, what we've seen them doing is involved, rather than passing bills that help to make this country better, they are spending their time in hearings, and especially over the last 8 years, hearings having to do with attempting to restrain the great orange man. and I mean, it's been pretty much insane. And going back to your original question about impeachment, right? Impeachment is supposed to be for crimes, high crimes and misdemeanors, right? And none of which was the case, but you saw Congress spend a lot of energy and a lot of our tax dollars attempting to prosecute, some would say persecute, Donald Trump in pursuit of constraining and limiting his ability to be the executive. And so, one of the things that I look back on, I'm actually in preparation for next week's show, I'm doing a lot of studying up on Woodrow Wilson, right? And Woodrow Wilson said that in one of the papers that he did before he became president, he sort of said that the administrative branch, well, the executive branch and the administration and the execution of government ended up being, at the time, looking more like a clerical activity, right? And so what he sought to do as president is to bring more, put a bit more teeth, I think, behind the ability of the executive to really execute the laws. And so, of course, we saw quite quickly a drift of responsibility and power to that end. But and to some extent, actually, I think contributes to the long-term inaction by Congress, because why do we in the legislature have to do anything? We've got this executive branch, administrative state that can do all of that sort of stuff under the covers.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
It is.
Over the past few years, my concern has been, as we watch Congress so call operate. And I apologize because I'm hearing an echo every time I speak. So it's kind of disturbing. But anyway, they're so partisan. They don't care about America many times. It's all about the agenda of whoever controls their party. And so when you use the power of Congress to trump up charges and to go after someone so you won't have them to occupy the seat of the presidency in the later years, that's a problem. And
Yeah.
now we know all this based on time has passed that's exactly what they did in order to keep this man out of office,
K. Carl,
not to
Michael,
lose faith.
to your point on this, again, looking through the lens of people listening to this show, the TV camera has become the most powerful weapon. So think about this. First of all, let's take impeachment. That's supposed to be trial like. It often is supposed to have follow criminal charges or some sort of court action. There's some legal issue. But look what happened during the Trump administration. They used it literally as performance art, and yet they didn't allow in normal, if any of you watching, if you get a traffic violation, have to go to traffic court, you have certain rights. You get to see what they're charging you with. You get to see their evidence. How many people don't realize in the impeachment, the people defending the president didn't get that right? It's okay. It looks good on TV. Of course, they weren't successful, but you look at that was so intentionally for the cameras. And then the other example I'll give you is hearings. You see a particular party, and I'm sorry, folks, but it does skew to a particular party, use their time in a hearing to make a speech and barely let the person at the microphone speak. You see another group that is well prepared, gets them there and says, for the record, could you explain to everyone listening what you meant by these words, why you're qualified to be a judge, or why the federal government should give your organization billions of dollars when you're not necessarily representing the public good? So the use of the camera in Congress is very interesting. I would submit to you, new weapon or new tool that was never envisioned by the founders, but is used both ways.
Yeah, I agree with that, Chris. I think we've seen the power of impeachment. For those of you that are interested, can be found in the Constitution, Article 2, Section 4, I think. Don't quote me on that. I might be wrong. But I think it's Article 2, Section 4, that the impeachment process, like you said, Chris, is a criminal proceeding, right? Like there was something like Mike had said, treason, bribery, some other high crime, some type of misdemeanor. And we're seeing it used as a tool to really just go after somebody who might not be popular. So somebody that's unpopular, let's say Trump. Democrats don't like him. So we're going to use the tool of impeachment to go after him. Even, I can't remember that guy. Who was the guy? Show me the person, I'll show you the crime. I can't think of who his name is, but it's like that type of thing. Like we're not using impeachment for what it's actually for. We're making some stuff up. We're going to say he did this, but there's really not that evidence. We're not going to let anybody talk about it. We're going to bring people out of the woodwork from 25 years ago, and
well, Aaron, in court, it's called perjury. You can
Yeah.
go to jail for it. But when Adam Schiff looks at cameras and says, I have a smoking gun or slam dunk, and he's lying. And of course, the recent disclosures only show not only how bad they were lying, but that they knew it was all a hoax. And I think people are asking, where's the accountability, the amount of money spent and time on that? There's no accountability, at least yet.
Yeah, that's the point. And they all do it because all about power and trying to win the White House or keep the White House. That's where you lose faith in that particular executive branch, in that particular legislative branch.
Yeah.
And I think it actually, K. Carl, it's designed to make people lose faith in government overall, right? That's what this whole thing is about, to destroy the integrity of our nation. And the fact of the matter is that our founders created this system that is absolutely amazing. But because of the fact that we don't have education, civics education, right? That's been deleted from schools, and the education that people are getting is through that narrow lens the media provides. Chris, you spoke of the fact that you have one side doing one thing, another side doing another. But when one side's message is amplified by the vast majority of media, it begins to be perceived as reality and the truth.
So, well, you're right, Chris. Sorry, not Chris. You're right, Mike. You guys, I hope you're all sitting down for this. So, I put into my prompt here, modern problems with impeachment, and the first one that comes up is one: it's overused as political theater, weaponized by both parties for media leverage or to rally the base, lowers the threshold for what constitutes an impeachable offense. I mean, even AI can tell us that it's being overutilized.
Well, you got to love the both parties thing, Aaron.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, exactly.
If you think about this, one of the things Frederick Douglass did, Gary, I read about, is he called out hypocrisy. And, these people thumping on Sunday and then slave whipping on Monday. Well, you look at this, Republicans. Well, Republicans called to at least begin looking into impeachment of Mayorkas. He was the director of Homeland Security, because there is a job description. And this guy would go on national TV saying, oh, I need more funds so we can secure the border, when everyone knew what he meant was process more illegal aliens into this catch and release program. So you look at the use of impeachment by one party, they didn't even bring it because it should only be brought in extraordinary circumstances. Or did they bring it against Mayorkas? But then they do this Trump thing, which is a joke. And now, of course, there's discussion of should there be impeachment of some district court judges. So it's a very interesting two-way sword here.
Hey, Chris, all of you guys, you're going to love this. I have a op-ed that I just finished yesterday, and it's called the Both Sides Fallacy. Right? And you're going to love
it. I can't wait to read that.
Yeah,
and Chris,
can't wait to check it out.
Hey, Chris, it's funny you just bring that up and about what you just talked about, the process, because number 2 on my list here is it's rarely carried thoroughly. It's rarely carried through efficiently, which just goes to show you that, it's not. And so I asked, what are some of the modern uses? And this goes back to Nixon in 74, then Clinton in 98. He was impeached but not removed. And then Trump in 2019 and 2021. And then, like you said, there's been various judges. So,
Aaron, if I might, kind of a consumer warning for people listening. So the tactic now used, and again, it tends to skew toward one particular side of the aisle and another, is to have someone start with an allegation. Other people agree with that allegation and may say something about it. And that allegation turns from an allegation to a concept of a conclusion that someone's guilty. And that turns itself into a narrative. And soon there is this snowball effect going down the hill of a bigger ball of snow going, oh, this is serious. And we're seeing now that's exactly what the Russia collusion hoax was, starting with Obama.
Yep.
But look at all the other stuff they do where people say, well, it's already the word debunked. Or you'll see people saying, well, that's the against the rule of law. And someone's going, well, what exactly do you mean? Did a court find against this particular law or person or action? So Congress too is being used, particularly on one side, to sort of create issues, snowball them, and get them in the media and stand in front of a camera saying, oh, I'm really concerned. Or, as is happening now, oh, that's old news. There's nothing there. So it's the nothing there stuff when, again, for everyone watching, Liberty Collaborative, the idea is to be truthful on all fronts.
Right.
What Congress is doing right now is applying law. They're getting facts, and they're saying, were laws broken? Now, personally, I think what Comey and these people did is treasonous, but technically they've got to find laws that these guys may have violated. And so I would point out to people, the other side, if the left can find laws that Trump or any Republican has violated, they have an obligation to go to court or to go to Congress. But what you're seeing is sort of not really a violation of any law or an allegation. It's sort of a, I don't know, a smear of stuff that never quite goes anywhere, except the allegation itself, which snowballs.
I think that's what's missing is that on both sides of the aisle, many of them don't have the moral courage to call things out. If they're minding their party doing something illegally, they're going to cover up, not talk about it, and that's
Right.
the problem.
Agreed. 100%. You see it on both sides.
I miss Trey Gowdy. He was pretty good at, in a homespun way, I guess, because he was a federal prosecutor, pointing out to people, if you say, how would you feel when you're pulled over and a police officer does this to you? It actually is no different. Dropping evidence in your car and claiming you had a bag of marijuana when you didn't, or hiding evidence to the everyday person. This is happening all over the country all the time. And it is insidious. It's terrible. But when it happens on this grand scale of our federal government, people say, have you noticed that literally claim after claim falls down, is dead, and they still repeat it as if it's true. And it's going on today with Russia collusion.
Yep.
There's still some people, including Obama, saying, no, it's common knowledge that really happened. And the facts are kind of going, no, it didn't.
Yep. That's going to be interesting to see where that one goes. I'm going to watch that one closely because
it's put Congress, you talk about a role for Congress. It has put Congress in the jump seat now of watching this unfold because they created the laws, and you see agencies handing other agencies like the CIA, DOJ, but it's Congress sort of saying, we want our laws to be faithfully executed and our money used properly. And I'll just throw this money part. I read some of the comments and some of the stuff. People are angry. The amount of money that's been spent on all this stuff is, I don't know, guys, it's in the 40, 50, it's in the billions of dollars that have been spent pursuing all this stuff.
They always make it last up to the election. They time it so perfectly. And I remember when they had the hearing about January 6ers and all that stuff. We call it hearings. That thing just lasted for a long time, needlessly, and didn't allow certain evidence in. We now know this. So when it comes to the legislative branch of the government, we have people in office who don't have the moral courage to be leaders and be truthful. So that's why I'm gonna share this quote with you from Frederick Douglass. Find out what any people will quietly submit to, and you have the exact measure of the injustice and wrong which will be imposed on them. We got to put people in office who are righteous on both sides of the aisle, and we're not doing a good job of that.
No, you're right, and I think we need term limits too. I'm a big fan of term limits. We have people that have been in Congress for decades that just are there for a paycheck, and like you said, they turn a blind eye to things. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but I think term limits is something we need, especially for some of these senators.
Aaron, I go back and forth in my head on that one because on the one hand, I agree these people need to be term limited, but on the other side, I think by putting that into law, what we do is just maybe contribute to the intellectual and laziness of the population, because that means that, well, they don't have to do it. So people will just learn how to steal and corrupt quicker.
Well, Aaron, to your point,
in the time they have left, right?
Yeah, Aaron, is term limits sort of an artificial report card? Because we know the voters say you're out of there, you're not delivering. And we know that when you're new to Congress, the way you get things done is you've got to get on committees, you've got to vote for things, you got to help candidates raise money. There's kind of rule of thumb. And to Michael's point, if you're in and out, you never can do those things. So the game is kind of wired that you've got to stay there. But I look at someone like Jim Jordan. I don't know, folks, but I hope he stays for a long time.
Yeah.
You look at good people like Trey Gowdy who left. And and there were some other guys that were really good, but the process ground them down. So I think, Aaron, it's a good point that maybe if I could rephrase what you said, is how do we hold these people accountable? Because everyone loves their representative, but they hate Congress, right? Look at national polls. We hate politicians, but our guy's okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Here in Connecticut, Joe Courtney's great, but we can't stand what they do there. So yeah, those are both good points, both definitely valid points. And
But in some cases, some people say my crook is better than your crook.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know how much time we have left, but one of the things, Aaron, that we talked about in the show notes, and guys, I'd just be very curious. So what you see is this default position from the media and many that lobbyists are bad, corporate control. And now, of course, it's spun to billionaires. And so you go, wait a second, the billionaire's got the same constitutional First Amendment right as you do. He's just got a lot more money. So then there's this question, well, how do you manage that? And I would offer a couple points, kick this off real quick. One, there are a lot of people elected, don't mean to take a shot, but have never really had a job. They've never made a payroll. They've never worked to build something. And so now they're legislating in the United States of America. So where are they going to get this information? It's called from lobbyists or people hired by companies like Microsoft, like Amazon, like McDonnell Douglas. Just take Boeing. You get it. In our area here, Northrop Grumman, Electric Boat. And they go up and say, here's what we need. You're creating these laws, but here's how so there's seems to be a natural dynamic of educating these people making laws on what industry needs. But there's a dark edge, which is I'll help you with your campaign financing and kind of help me out. And we can't deny that.
Yeah, I agree with that, Chris. I think that's where things go south, right? The lobbyists have their First Amendment right to redress the government lawmakers and kind of, you would think, tell them what the news on the ground is or what they're lobbying for. What is it? The NRA, Planned Parenthood, that sort of thing, disabled veterans. And I think you're right. Where the problem comes into is where they start saying, hey, we're gonna, we'll fund this, we'll give you money for that. You've just got to, these backroom deals. I mean, look at some of these people like AOC. She's like a millionaire now, and they make what, $120,000 a year. Like, how do these people get so rich? So there's something going on behind the scenes that the average people like ourselves aren't aware of or privy to. And I think, lobbying has its place, but when it starts to create those backroom deals and people start getting paid off for lavish vacations or what have you, I think that's where the dark side of lobbying comes into play.
Well, Aaron, if I might, I don't want to dominate. I'm just fired up about this particular topic. So they're so good at designing ways around. So witness, suddenly a guy who's in the press a lot, or used to be, becomes a famous artist and people buying his artwork. Did you ever notice once his dad was out of being president, no one bought his artwork? Or someone writes a book and people buy truckloads of that book.
Yep.
All legal, but questionable, right? Or in the case of one of my favorites, Russia paying Bill Clinton to speak to them for $500,000, $500,000 speaking fee from the Clinton Foundation, while at the same time his wife, Secretary of State, is approving a uranium deal in Canada, giving it to the Russians. And so you look at this and say, does anything look wrong there? And so they're mad when Trump's name is on a hotel and some government employees stay there. Oh my God. So it's really a mash here.
That all happened when the Democrats were in office, let's be honest. And she did that. And where's the justice? Where's the Department of Justice coming after that type of corruption or that conflict of interest? Nowhere.
Yeah, it's well, we've covered the judicial branch, certainly, and next week we're going to cover the executive, or if you will, the agencies. But if you think about the power of the badge, right? The badge. I am a federal agent, and I have the power of the taxpayer subpoena. That of all things, that has to be used so carefully and judiciously. You know, the justice with the blindfold. And what we've seen, guys, is really that one tool, among others, but that most terrifying against political opponents, going up and using them. So the power of Congress to sort of tamp this down and slow it down, and just in terms of wrapping up or congressional founder design, I think Congress was designed in part not to work so well, or to take a long time,
Yeah.
to be judicious and to work through things so that there was time. And it was written about in the Federalist Papers about passions, letting passions calm, and sort of this rational, more thoughtful, fact-based approach. So maybe the dysfunction, Michael, of Congress is good for our country as kind of this this brake or shock absorber.
Yeah, and Chris, what I would say is that it was designed that way to go slow, right? But one of the, and I'll keep harping on this forever, is that one of the big missing pieces of the design is a citizenry that actually holds the people that we elect to represent us accountable for results. And for whatever reason, that continues to sort of dip down in terms of interest. So I think, you know, one of the things and one of the reasons that we're doing this podcast is to help to begin to raise awareness and get people more actively engaged in holding these people accountable by helping them to understand, one, what liberty is, and two, what it means to actually engage in being a good citizen.
Yeah, well said, Mike, and I couldn't agree more. And that starts for me right at the local level, going to your town council, speaking out during public comments, your board of ed meetings, all those types of things, you know, and getting involved in the local community, because that's kind of where all this stuff starts and goes uphill, so to speak. But guys, we are coming up on 47 minutes. We went long today, fellas. Good talk. So I'll start off with K. Carl. Any closing comments?
Only thing I want to say that Congress should be the guardian of our freedom, not the enabler of oppression. Let's stay vigilant.
Mike?
Yeah, I'd say that, you know, our legislature only functions if we hold people. It only functions the way that it should if we hold the people we elect accountable. And so I would just encourage people to learn more about our founding principles, the founding documents, and get engaged. And the thing that I think most people don't realize, that once you actually start to dig into this stuff, you'll find it absolutely fascinating.
Wow, that's absolutely. Aaron, I would
What
just
the heck was that?
yeah, that was
Can't let this
sounds like a
slide.
jet flying over. Aaron, K. Carl, Michael, I would offer this. Everybody go to your elected representatives and say, stop coming home and saying, I brought home the bacon. I brought funding for this. No, you didn't. You took other people's tax money and you argued it ought to be distributed in your particular district, in your state. So there's a dynamic here that just keeps spending going. Why don't you instead say, what budget cuts? What can we do to stop taking as much money from the taxpayer on both sides? Because they're in a cabal together that constantly increase spending. And so that is the question I would ask your Congress, and remove the thing. No, don't bring home the bacon. Say you're part of reducing the burden of federal government on the U.S. taxpayer.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that, you know, and I'll close out with these two thoughts. One, Chris, you say that about bringing home the bacon. And when I ran for office last year for the House, for state rep here in Connecticut, I went into the local RTC looking for endorsement. And one of the questions was, how are you going to bring home the bacon like the opponent, the person I was going up against? And I was like, really, like, I get it. Our town, Mansfield, 40% of its budget is federal or state government money. We get payment in lieu of taxes and stuff like that. So if we lost that money, yeah, things could get really bad for our town. But that always stuck out in my head is, how are you going to bring in the money like so-and-so? And how are you going to bring the bacon? And I was just like
parting on a credit card. Eventually someone's going to have to pay.
Exactly. So with that in mind, for those of you who are listening, if somebody shared this with you, you can find us on all your modern podcasting apps. You can find us on YouTube under Liberty Collaborative, libertycollaborative.substack.com. And if you'd like to email the show, it's libertycollaborative1818@gmail.com. So please like, subscribe, share it with somebody that you might need to enlighten a little bit of what's going on in the world around them. And fellas, with that, I will see you all next week.
All right. I'm off going to eat a BL sandwich.
Thanks for joining us on the Liberty Collaborative. If today's episode lit a fire or gave you clarity, share it and be part of the movement. Subscribe, leave a review, and keep the conversation going. Until next time, stand firm, stay free.
All right, that was a good one, guys.
Voice?
Oh,